that happen. If they're not happening, then it's very difficult to identify where your problems are. So next slide. One click. And again. So kind of starting at the beginning, we need to establish better technical skills at all levels, from the livestock handler all the way through to the livestock managers and the traditional leadership, and their understanding of what is required, what is important, how we track and measuring this. And so our starting point is the livestock handler, because that is where animal health begins and ends. You can have the best veterinary service in the world, the best vets in the world, but if the person working with the animal can't early on say, wait a second, there's a problem with this animal, then you can't bring that whole veterinary support service into play. And so that was our starting point. How do we empower that individual? What do they need to know and be able to do in order to interact with this body of veterinary knowledge? Okay. And again, it's about understanding kind of the lowest level. How do we create opportunities for an individual to take charge of their life, to take charge of their assets and resources? Okay, but then at the same time, how do we create a broader structure and network that can then allow those benefits and those actions to have the maximum impact and be as cost effective as possible and be accessible to everyone in the community, not just the few who really take on the challenge. Next slide. Again. And again. And again. So the flip side that we developed, okay, is the extension. Now, the clinical veterinary model is very well established in South Africa. On a commercial one, I've got a problem with my cow, I don't know how to handle it, I motivate the veterinary runs out, they do something, they drive home, I pay them for their time. The minimum that's going to cost me is 2,500, 3,000 rand. Now, that model works okay in the commercial sector. Well, it works for the vet and the farmer. The farmer's got the resources, they've got the technical expertise, the vet's getting paid, everyone's happy. That system doesn't work in a smallholder sector because there's too many farmers with too poor a technical understanding, too few resources, and they don't know when to use a vet or not. Even if they did know, a vet can't just run around driving. You have to look at how do we empower that individual to, as far as possible, take care of that animal, and when they engage with a vet, okay, they maximize the benefit, and generally speaking, as far as we're concerned, no emergency treatment is possible. So the support that's going to be provided is a remote technical support service, and again, that is the opportunity of mobile devices and smartphones. And you know, we've worked on and developed various apps and stuff like that, but you don't need all of that. All you need to know is have a trained individual at ground level who can identify the signs of disease and identify them early, and who can record and report that to a veterinary professional. And then that veterinary professional can service 1,000, 10,000 farmers, okay? And now all of a sudden the cost of that vet becomes negligible to the ultimate benefit to the production. And so it's a case of how do we set up this sort of a support network for your kingdom? And it can be at a village level, it can be at a local municipality level, it can be at all sorts of levels. Next slide. So, traceability, okay? And people often think this is kind of ear tags and stuff like that, and it is to a degree. But for me, what's more important about it is it's about having records of what is happening with your animals and having those properly documented. Because with those records, we can start to understand what is or isn't working, and we can make decisions on what to invest in and what the return on that investment is. If there's no records, it's very, very difficult to A, choose what to invest in, and B, then to measure was there a return on that investment, because there has to be some sort of a return or else the investment can't be sustainable. So what I'm looking at here are just some basic production metrics, and what we need to understand is what are these numbers for the kingdom, and they're obviously going to vary from farmer to farmer, But at a certain level, we need to understand it for the whole community, and we can do that on maybe more basic metrics in terms of what's the population, what is the herd structure, and I'll get to why that's important. And then as you develop the kind of the information systems, and that's just basic reporting, that's not kind of fancy computer stuff, is understanding where are our mortalities, what are causing those mortalities, okay, what are we going to do about it, and what's the impact thereof. And I'll just run you through kind of what this means. If I take a kind of a classic communal setup versus a commercial, okay? So we've got 100 animals. Both groups have got 100 animals. On the one, okay, in a smallholder system, what we generally find is about 40% of those animals are oxen, okay? And for me, oxen are unproductive animals. They cannot make babies, they cannot have babies, but they like to eat grass, okay? On the other hand, if you looked at that same 100 animals in a commercial sector, you're going to have 4% of those animals being male, and they're all going to be bulls, okay? So what that means is if we then say, well, how many productive cows do we have? In the one, because of the dominance of those oxen, you're only going to have 40 cows. Okay, on the other, because of the relatively less male animals, you're going to have 60% productive cows. The balance are going to be your replacement heifers, so each year you're getting that share. If you then look at the calving percentage, so the calving percentage is simply for every 100 cows, how many calves do you have? Okay, in a communal setup, you're generally going to have a calving percentage of 40-50%. Now, we can argue about the numbers. On a good year, it'll go up to 60%. On a bad year, it'll go down to 30%. But for now, let's just work on 40%. Okay, so for every 100 cows, only 40% of them will have calves. It's generally the primary driver of this is access to nutrition. If you take a cow and it's in a condition score of 2.5, 80% of them will get pregnant. Okay, assuming no venereal disease and stuff like that, 80% of them will get pregnant. If you take that same group of cows, but now they're in a condition score of 2, 40% will get pregnant. And this applies to your fancy commercial breeds, it applies to your communal breeds, it applies to all cattle. If they're in good condition, they get pregnant. So what that means is in a communal setup, of my 40 cows, I only have 16 calves. In a commercial setup, of my 60 cows, I have 51 calves. Okay? Now, and I think this next point is probably the low-hanging fruit that we can really address quite quickly and easily. Of those 16 cows, okay, calves, in a communal setup, 50% of them will die before weaning. Okay? In a commercial, 5% maybe will die. And what that means is at the end of the year, if I look at my surviving weaners that are available for sale, in the one group I've got 10 animals, in the other one I've got 48. And so it's a question of how do we look at our livestock production at individual farmer level, at village level, at municipal and district level, and say how do I address each of those things? How do I change my herd structure so that it is optimal? Okay, and we can take into account any traditional or cultural practices. If we need a certain number of oxen to perform function ABC, then obviously you want to have it. But do you want to sit at 40%? And do you understand the cost of sitting at 40% as an individual farmer and as a community? So how do we get those cows as productive as possible? How do we get the unproductive animals off the veldt? How do we up that calving percentage? What are our strategies there? What are our strategies to reduce the mortalities? And that's obviously what I'm going to be talking about today. Next slide. And again. Okay. A couple more. And stop. Thank you very much. Okay. So animal health, the starting point and kind of where we come from, generally speaking. I'm always told by farmers, the stock remedies, they're very expensive, very expensive. Now, they are, okay, they're not cheap. But the cost of disease is not the stock remedy. The cost of the disease is the losses that occur from disease. Okay, so, a silly example, if on the coastal area we'll find a lot of tick problems. Okay, so if we do a dipping treatment of 1,000 animals, it'll cost about 50 cents per animal, so 500 Rand, okay? If one of those animals dies as a result of a tick-borne disease, because in areas where ticks are a problem, that's 50% of your problems are coming from those. 50% of your disease is coming from ticks. If one animal dies, that's immediately a loss of 7,000 to 10,000 Rand, okay? And that's the cost of disease, not the 50 cents that was spent on dipping. Often what we find is government's often funding the dipping programs, but then government doesn't have any dip available or whatever happens. So the community, no, we're not dipping. But now, the cost of not dipping, okay, is not the 500 Rand. The cost is the 7,000, 10,000 Rand animal that's lost. And so that's where communities need to take charge of how they manage their health. And if government's going to support them, that's fantastic. And we will obviously take whatever we can get to make the cost of production as little as possible. Okay, but we need to understand the cost and benefits. And we need to take personal charge of saying, well, if you're not going to provide dip, we're going to dip because we see where we're going with this and why. So, in disease treatment, okay, time is the critical factor. We started this business 15 odd years ago because of the fact that we constantly got phone calls from farmers saying, my cow's sick. Okay, what's wrong? No, it's been lying down for 3 days. Now, anyone who's a livestock farmer and a good farmer, specifically with cattle, knows that a cow that's been lying down for 3 days is dead. It might not have realized it's dead yet, but it's dead. Okay? And what happened is that 2 to 3 weeks ago, something started happening. And if at that point we had identified that first sign of disease, okay, then A, it's easier to identify the cause of disease, but B, when you treat it, it'll recover quicker. Okay? And so how do we set up a system, okay, that allows us to identify disease as early as possible? Okay? Because at that point, as I said, it's easier to identify what the cause of disease is, and you can actually action effective treatment. The best example of this is pneumonia. Okay? Now, with pneumonia, and I'm sure you all livestock farmers that are experienced with pneumonia, from when the first sign of disease is visible, okay? So now the animal's standing and his head's down, his ears are hanging, maybe moving a bit slower, might see a bit of snot, okay? If you took that animal's temperature, it's going to have a temperature of above 40 degrees, okay? From when that happens until it's too late to treat because the animal will die or it'll be permanently incapacitated is 48 hours. And so the only person who can identify that problem and action treatment is the one that's working with them on a daily basis. Okay? Because otherwise what happens, okay, is there's two scenarios. My animal looks like that, I take a temperature, I see it's a systemic infection, it's got a fever reaction, this is a problem in the whole body, okay? I've then got 24 to 48 hours to action treatment. That same animal, okay, if it doesn't have a temperature, then it's literally got a snotty nose. Okay, it's got kind of a, we all know the difference between a snotty nose and a proper flu. So, now, the one requires an emergency treatment of antibiotics. Okay, over-the-counter, freely available tetracycline antibiotics, but it requires immediate treatment. The other requires you to check that animal again the next day, and the day after until it gets better. Okay, it's not an emergency. Now, if we go back to my previous example of the vet, in the one, I call the vet out, but now I missed the first sign of disease, so actually there's nothing the vet can do. In the other, it's just a snotty nose, so I've incurred the cost of a 2,500 Rand vet visit really to wipe a snotty nose. And so that's what we're trying to do, is say, how do we empower that individual? How do we give them access to some support? And ideally with your community animal health workers, now you've got someone who when I say, oh, I've got a problem here, they can come out. We've trained them on the whole methodology of observation, closer examination, and then background information. Sorry, just one more click. Okay, so that's early disease identification, okay, and actually what we must think about is early disease identification is generally speaking where we failed, okay, so we want to limit the cost of our failure okay? But this is vitally important. What is actually the most cost-effective way of managing health are your planned herd health actions, okay? And now your herd health actions are simply a series of time-bound basic actions that have to happen, okay? And now you can do some clicks, so 1, 2, 3, okay. And your herd health plan is very simply saying identify what your priority diseases are, okay? And if that's just one disease, ticks around the coastal area. Up here we're not going to worry too much about ticks, but at the coast, ticks are your number one disease. Okay, so you identify what your priority is, you develop a practical series of actions around that, okay? And then you implement it and you actively track it because it has to happen, okay? If you're protecting your animals against tick-borne diseases through a dipping strategy, you can't miss a week. So if that is your strategy, you need to understand that you can't miss a week, and you need to be getting those reports to see that that's happening every week. Okay, you can click again. Sorry. So just some examples of kind of how practical we try to become, okay, is observation. This is the methodology we created around observation. So you need to remember 5 things, okay? The first thing that you look at, and you can look at every animal every day around this, is head up. You know that when you walk up to a group of cattle, as you walk up, they all look at you, okay? The one that doesn't look at you is sick, okay? So head up and behavior. The second one is ruminant, okay? So on the left-hand side of a cow, the skin basically touches right on the stomach, okay? So if on that left-hand side it's sunken in, okay, that animal hasn't eaten in 24 hours. We all know when we're sick, you don't really want to eat, okay? So if we see an animal that's heads down, it's got a sunken in rumen full, okay? We know it's not feeling great and it's not eating, okay? And now we know we've got to look a lot closer. The last one is the normal movement. So we need to be watching the animals as they exit a kraal, as they're walking in the veld. How are they moving? Are they moving normally? Okay. Just going back to the rumen full. So if the left hand sunken in, 12 to 24 hours. If the right hand sunken in, that means that the whole intestine is now empty. Okay, that animal hasn't eaten for more than 48 hours. And now you know that you've got to do something. Okay, so those 3 observation points, okay, that you can look at every single day, and everyone needs to be trained in doing that. And the only way you get really good at it is by doing it every day, because then you understand exactly what normal looks like for your animals, and you'll pick up like this as soon as something's wrong. I'm not a vet, but my partner Donnie Windall is very experienced in the thing. He'll walk up to a group of animals and immediately is like, there's something wrong with that one, that one, that one. Those same animals have had a livestock handler sitting with them for 2 weeks. And so how do we improve those basic observation skills and really stress the importance of it? Sorry, click one more. So along with observation, we get closer examination, okay? Now, whenever we identify any sign of disease, and remember we're looking for that first sign of disease, it's vital that immediately we do a closer examination, okay? And because with this information, now I can phone a vet and they can help me, okay? And the closer examination is very simple. So the one, before I get into it, the one thing that's vital, okay? The only time you will do a closer examination of an animal is if you've got proper handling facilities. If you don't, you're going to wait 4 days until the animal's lying down and then you'll look at it. But by that time, it's too late. Okay, so it's essential that as far as possible we establish basic handling facilities ideally at village level. Ideally, each farmer should have some sort of a crush within their kraal area, but if not, at village level, we need to have an area where we can bring animals together and we can work with them. Because otherwise we can't do the examination, we're going to incur that cost, we can't do the treatment, we can't do the planned herd health actions. Okay, so that infrastructure is vital, it's not particularly expensive, it can be built by a community, and it needs to be maintained by that community because it's vital to everything. So closer examination, it's really just 3 things. Taking the temperature. Does that animal have a raised temperature, in which case there's a systemic infection, in which case you have an emergency, or does it not? Okay? It allows us to differentiate between a parasitic infection, which requires certain steps, and there's a certain urgency, versus infections, which require different steps, and there's a much more pressing emergency. The second step is an eye exam. With the eye exam, and there's a very specific technique here, okay? It's not just pulling open the eye, because what you're actually inspecting is the inner eyelid. You're assessing the blood supply. And in assessing the blood supply, you're able to tell, is that animal anemic? Is it losing blood? Okay. Is it, that's it, it's very pale. Okay. And if you see pale, it's an emergency. That animal's running out of blood. Now, it could be caused by liver flukes or worms, specifically in sheep. It could be caused by red water or some sort of a disease. So if it's yellow, it's poisoning. If it's brown, if it's yellow, it's liver. If it's brown, it is generally speaking a poisoning of some sort. If it's like kind of purplish, then it's generally a breathing issue. The animal's not getting enough oxygen. And if it's very red, that's generally a sign of infection. So all of these little signs point us in the direction of where we're going. Now, if you speak to a vet with this information, they can be 10,000 kilometers away from you. They can give you good advice, tell you exactly what to do. If you phone that same vet and say, I'm sick, there's nothing they can do. Nothing meaningful. Okay, click again. So what we have done is we've kind of taken this whole methodology and we've packaged it as an app, and we're trying to develop it further and make it as practical as possible. Just kind of as an example of where we're trying to go and the type of tools that we're trying to build. But again, the basics of what I've spoken to you about today are those alone are very powerful tools, okay, and can do a lot. And again, this is just kind of an example of what we're talking about planned herd health actions, okay? So what you're looking at here, and we're very proud of this, is it's showing you the 3 factors around disease, all in one slide, okay? And the 3 factors are the disease, okay? Then there's the environment, and then there's the animal. Now, all 3 have to come together for disease to occur. If only 2 of them are there, the disease doesn't occur. Easiest example, ticks and worms. The ticks are there in winter, but they're not active. It's too cold. It's too dry. As soon as we start to see some heat coming through, now all of a sudden the ticks start coming. Okay? So when we're planning around our health, when we're observing our animals, we need to be looking at these other factors, because then it allows us to identify when things are likely to occur. Okay, so we've mapped that out, and we can customize that per community, per village, wherever, because, you know, up here, ticks aren't going to be a big problem. If we have the coast, ticks are going to be a big problem. And from that, we can customize a herd health plan. So can you click it? Okay, and doesn't come out very well, but basically, the herd health plan is just saying per day, week, month, season, these are the actions we are going to take with these groups of animals. So at certain times of the year, we want to do this with cows, this with heifers, you know, your vaccinations, your tick control, your deworming, all of that sort of stuff. It's saying this is when we're going to do what, and who's going to do it, and how they're going to report on it.
Thanks. Okay, I wanted to just see if they still together. While you're busy, it was difficult to anticipate, perhaps, were your last slide or your second last. But I didn't want you to finish without asking you to pull out the part now where perhaps you would have shared an experience with the audience of where you've been and what and who you've worked with first.
Yeah.
Just in terms of the case, because I think the point is here that animal health is important.
So this is the last slide on health. I'm with you. So sorry, if you just, so what you'll see there at the bottom there, okay, when we're talking about practical actions and what we've done, okay, is that's just the tick inspection form, okay. Now, right now, the people who are working with the animals should be conducting a tick inspection every single week, okay? And the tick inspection there's a structure to it, okay? Because you're looking at certain attachment sites, and you're reporting on the number of ticks and where they're attached. Because again, that allows us to understand what type of ticks are a problem and how big a problem they are. So if you click again. And again, this is just talking about kind of the different levels within the herd health plan, so you can click again. Go through the next slide, yeah. Okay. And again. Okay. I'm going to try and go through this stuff relatively quickly, just so I can kind of maybe get to some of the examples, because I think some of this background is important. But again, just like with your herd health management, your production management is vitally important, and we can ahead of time plan what those actions are. Okay, and list them out. And you can see there we've got the 4 stages of production, and within each we've got critical control points that need to be built into your personal plan. So you can click again, and again, and again. Okay, so the number one thing that we've seen, okay, is the importance of supplementary feed. Because you're targeting 1 calf per cow per year. Now the problem that we've got is that in the communal areas, okay, there's a lot of pressure on the grazing, and even in commercial farms, there's never enough nutrition available to supplement, to provide what the cow needs throughout the year. They have to supplement. Okay, it's the biggest cost on any commercial farm. And what it allows you to do is it allows that animal to be in good enough condition at the end of winter when it starts calving to recover in time so that it gets pregnant 3 months later. Okay, and so looking at how we get supplementary feed working and targeting those cows is critical, and it's a big part of what we're looking to do, and it's a big part of what a farmer production support unit needs to achieve. So you can click again. The other one is calving management, and I'm going to just, we're seeing a huge number of problems with calving, and there's no structure in place around how you manage calving, how you prepare for it. So that you've got calving ropes, you've got individuals who are looking to support the animals with calving. You're seeing a lot of those prolapses, okay, and that's coming from a lot of animals in poor condition who are calving down. Sorry, next slide. Okay, your grazing is your ultimate constraint, okay. Once you've sorted out health and production, at the end of the day, it's how much food have you got available and how sustainably is that being managed. What we can see is the area we're working in is relatively strong from a grazing capacity, okay? What we need to make sure is that we're not degrading that resource, because again, in the communities we're working and driving here, I could see it, okay? You're seeing overgrazing, you're seeing the resultant soil erosion, you're seeing the bush densification, and all of that reduces that carrying capacity, which reduces your ultimate potential. Now, one of the opportunities, and we're working with guys who are doing this, is to access carbon credit funding, okay, for rangeland restoration. So what that entails is for a community, the minimum target is around 2,500 hectares, to sign up to a grazing agreement where they agree that they're going to rest an area of grazing for winter. Okay, and through that, the partners that we work with have managed to get an agreement which will pay in a certain amount of money, okay, per hectare based on those actions being taken and based on the improvements in rangeland. Now, that means it's a double benefit. Not only are you managing your rangeland better, and you're going to have cows in better condition when they go on calving, but you're also going to get some supplementary money coming in to support all of the interventions I've been speaking about. Next slide. So, as I say, Norwell, okay, 50,000 head of cattle, between 500 and a million sheep, and going back to our traceability number, if you don't know whether you've got 500,000 or a million sheep, you've got a big problem, okay? Because how do you know how good or bad you are, okay? And so it's these basic numbers, and again, at a local level, all the way up to a regional level, we have to have some sort of an understanding, some sort of an order of magnitude. So they haven't had a livestock auction since 2006. We identified 5 priority lip tanks, and we've been working very closely with them, and we had the first auction there about 2-3 months ago. okay? They sold 97 animals. They made 700,000 rand, okay? And the funny thing was that there was no problem with the buyers, okay? We had to supplement some of the buyers coming in from like Hogsback and stuff like that, but ultimately you'll find buyers, that's not a problem. The farmers hadn't been exposed to auctions before, and so they were a little bit not trusting. So some of the cows that we sold were for 2,000 rand. Now a 2,000 rand cow, you don't need to put it on a loading rack, you pick it up and you put it on the truck, okay? And those animals were still bought, and the farmers were still happy, which tells you something about the condition of those animals. But that's not bad news, because you've got to get those animals off the cart. Okay, so click next slide. Okay, because again, the unproductive animals, we have to get them off the cart. Because it's an opportunity, it both generates some short-term income, so that we can make the investments we need to become more productive. Okay, so the oxen, that one. So the oxen I've spoken about, the old cows, okay. Every single year at calving, you need to take that cow, you need to do an inspection of its mouth, and you need to determine whether it's got enough teeth to carry on breeding with. Because otherwise what happens, okay, is you've got a cow that's worth 10,000 rand. It's breeding, it's great. Its teeth are now running out. It goes too far, it has one last calf, okay. It isn't able to eat enough to ever regain its condition. And so what we see over the next 18 to 24 months is that cow just does this. And how does it end? It either ends in a dying essentially of starvation, or we sell it for 2,000 rand. That was the same animal that 2 years before we could have sold for 10,000 rand. There's no way of recovering that lost money. Okay, and so there has to be a proactive, and again, it can happen at individual level, it can happen at village level, but identifying those animals, I'm not going to breed with that animal, I'm going to make sure that it's in great condition, I'm going to put the calf on its back, is the expression we use, okay, and I'm going to sell it, because I want to maximize the value of that animal, and I'm now going to replace it with another heifer. In terms of livestock marketing, livestock auctions, not a problem. Okay, we work with BKB. I was having a discussion with Karen Beef the other day. We work with Meat Naturally, who focus very much on the kind of the communal smallholder sector. If the only tricky thing with an auction is getting 200 animals together, and what we found, and the successes we've had, is with the Siamdindile community in KZN, where we set up these community animal health workers, they hadn't been able to host an auction in 5 years because they couldn't get enough animals together. We set up these individuals at the tank level, okay, who could then now motivate farmers to get their animals to auction, okay? Because it's a different story in terms of an animal health technician who you don't know, you see every 3 months and they say there's an auction, to now someone who says, listen, I know that you need money, okay? I know you've got school fees. I know it's coming up to Christmas and you've got these expenses. Why don't you get rid of one of those auctions? Why don't you sell that old cow, okay? And what we saw there is it went from having no auctions to date, I think they've had something like 80 auctions. Every single one has raised more than R1 million. And that's from a communal, smallholder farming society, just like we see in the Eastern Cape. Okay? Feedlots to be very careful of. It sounds sexy, it sounds great, it's a good way to lose a lot of money quickly. Specifically at the current weaner price. If you've got a weaner, sell it. Don't try to feed it, okay? The cost of a feedlot is not in setting it up in the infrastructure, the cost is in feeding animals. At the moment, Karen Beef, the biggest feedlot in South Africa, sitting at less than 50% of capacity. Why? Because they're losing money with every animal they feed, and so they just try to limit losses, and they've got all of the technical ability, they've got the cheapest feed, they've got everything, okay? Again, slaughtering, careful, it sounds nice, I want to have my own abattoir. There's plenty of abattoir capacity in South Africa. If you get to a point where you've sorted out your production, you're auctioning and then you can get to slaughter, okay? Processing retail is definitely an opportunity. So go get that animal, get it custom slaughtered and process it. Next slide. This is just an example of kind of how we see these herd structures evolving. Okay, and what you'll see is that over 10 years, and you guys have got a 20-year vision, okay, is how initially the number of animals will dip because you're aggressively selling off those oxen, because you need that income to fund proper production management, and you're slowly trying to, well, as quickly as possible, you're trying to grow your productive animals. Okay, so we can see here how the oxen, which is that orange line, drops down. We can see how the cows, which is that grey line, picks up. Okay, and then we can also see that yellow line, which is your replacement heifers. And so over a 10-year period, you look to restructure that whole herd. Okay, next slide. And like this is the one maybe counterintuitively opportunity of the situation is that we've got animals that are immediately available for sale. Okay, and those are those unproductive animals because we need to sell them, get them off the veldt, open it up for our productive animals, and generate the income we need to reinvest in our communities. Next slide. So my final thoughts as a way of wrapping it up. Okay, traceability is critical. You've got to have traceability in your system. You've got to understand where your production is at, okay, and what returns you're getting on your different investments. Animal health, there's two sides. Early disease identification. How do you set up those systems so that you're identifying problems earlier and getting on top of them early, okay? You're not dealing with chronic conditions. And then identify your priority diseases. In fact, identify your priority disease. Put a practical plan in place and then track to see how it's working. Livestock production, supplementary feed, calving management is your biggest thing. Rangeland management, it is the ultimate constraint. Okay, you've got to think about climate change because I don't think the world's going to become an easier place to live in, okay? But at the same time, it creates opportunities around carbon funding, okay? And the way to access that is the more organized you are, the more you've got alignment as a community, and again, it could be at village level, local, municipal, or district level, the easier it is to access these things. And last click, livestock marketing. Got to sell those unproductive animals because without that income, you can't invest in the interventions needed. You can't make them sustainable. So that is my overview of the lessons I've learned. It is quite a tough one because obviously I'm trying to pack in a lot of my lessons. I'm speaking to an audience that I don't really know, and there's a lot of different ideas there. But you know, the takeaway I think is that you've got to create opportunities for the individual to take charge of their life. You've got to create systems that can support the community and that mean that animal health and production management are as cost effective as possible. I think those same systems lend themselves to identifying animals for sale and coordinating those animals for sale. And if you can organize the animals, selling them is not a problem. And it's more important that you sell them than you try add on an extra 50 kilograms for improved breeds and stuff like that. You know, genetics is the next step. Okay, for now, the animals that are surviving on the land, that are coping on the land, those are the best animals. Okay, and it's more important to breed effectively with those animals than try and make a slightly heavier animal. Thank you. I hope there's been some insights that have assisted.
Thank you, Matthew. I'm going to ask you to hang on the translation. And just to anticipate two questions, which I'll raise myself, and then we'll open up. One is, I would like you to explain the carbon trading side of things. It's the first time that it's surfacing now. And the second one is, how do you engage with community? Suppose you will need it here tomorrow or next week. What is the process that is followed? Just those two questions and then we'll open.
So the carbon credits, basically what happens is that a community signs up to a grazing agreement. That grazing agreement entails certain commitments, initially around just a winter rest area where no grazing happens during the summer, so that those animals can graze there in the winter. That just lessens the general pressure on these areas and allows for recovery of the grazing and everything like that. What the carbon credit funding allows is that for communities that have signed up to this program, an assessment is done of those health conditions, of their compliance, and based on that, the organisation that we have worked with has kind of raised a debt against future carbon credits. And so they can then fund a amount per hectare, somewhere in the region of 35 to 60 Rand a hectare. Now, that can sound like a little bit of money if you're talking about 1,000, 2,000 hectares, but if you're talking about 10,000 animals, which in these grazing conditions should be on 50 to 100,000 hectares, all of a sudden you've got some substantial money that can fund your vets, that can fund your animal health technicians, that can fund their vehicles and transport, etc. In terms of engaging with us, we're in it for the long haul, and we would be keen to see how we work with you, be it at a local level or at a kind of higher level. Funding is always a kind of a key constraint. We've got limited funds as a private company, specifically my business. It's a relatively small business. We have made various applications for donor funding, and if that comes through, and if we've got good relationships with the traditional leadership and the support, because the community mobilization is vital. Like I can give technical inputs. I can't do the kind of that community facilitation. I'm an outsider. So if we've got that sort of support and commitment and vision, then we can come in and provide support. So there's grant funding opportunities, there's CETA funding opportunities. Okay, and otherwise there's softer landings. If you've got individuals identified, then we'd be keen to talk to see how we can support them. Everything, when you try to do these things at scale, they become very expensive very quickly. Okay, but some of the interventions are quite basic. I mean, we've got these training manuals we've translated into isiXhosa. We're busy now with our Agri-CETA courses, translating them into isiXhosa, so that we can make it as accessible as possible. And so, yeah, there's no set way.
Thanks very much, Mark. Let's try. Let's take a few questions.
Yeah.
And yeah.
All right, I meant to apologize up front for my talk in English. I wish I could have given it in isiXhosa, but I struggle with Afrikaans, let alone this.
Thank you, sir. Asking that. Mine is not a question, just a comment. I'm coming from the coastal area, Charuna area. As I'm speaking, the farm owners, livestock owners, they don't eat livers of their slaughtered animals because they are all rotten.
No.
They have been approaching government to get assistance. I'm not very sure how far they can do that. You see, the kind of information you are giving to us, to me, it will be really much more relevant to our farmers. It's good to address it to us so that we know that there is this kind of assistance that our people can get. We are not getting this service. It is very, very important. I'm happy that you have said you have been appointed by government or municipality. I would say if that that arrangement can be taken to various areas, because this is the kind of information we want, in order not to improve the livestock. You are saying we are losing about 10 billion a year of money because of the poor management, of our livestock, by the small scale farmers. That's a lot of money. And you are right, we are losing this money. So what I'm trying to say, it is good to know that there is this kind of information that we can get as farmers. And I would really And I would comment, whoever, recommended you to come and address us on this issue, because it is really relevant and important to us. Thank you very much.
Thanks. So, one of the things that I think that's really important is as a community, as a kingdom, you take charge of this and you take ownership of this challenge. And people like myself, we become service providers to supporting you. We don't do it all, if you know what I mean. Because I talk a good game, but can I deliver? And if I can't deliver, everything can't fall down. I must go, and the next person must come in. In terms of challenges like that with the livers, I think part of what it takes is a decision by the farmers, okay? If you've asked government for help and they're not helping, okay, then you need to pay a private vet to come and do a post-mortem inspection. I would imagine it's liver fluke, okay? And then set up a plan of how we manage it. One of the things with liver fluke is it means that those flay areas, where it kind of floods, where it's kind of grassy, watery and stuff like that, during that season those animals can't graze there. Because if they do, that's where they pick up the flukes, okay? And then it's a big problem. There are treatments for it that you can do, but that's the perfect example of what I'm talking about is identify one problem, confirm that it is the problem, put a plan in place, and then implement that plan and track it. And then if it's not working, then you need to change your plan. If it is working, then you need to keep on implementing. But I'll obviously make my contact details available. I'm more than happy to engage at like an individual level about problems like that, about approaching local municipalities to see how we work with them. And what I've realized is we can work with people who are willing and committed. And even if there's no funds in the short term, we can provide some sort of support and some sort of direction and some sort of advice as to where to go. And from that, we build relationships and we build solutions that work because, we're all in it for the long haul. I'm not going anywhere. And so, yeah, I look forward to that.
Thanks. I'm going to allow you to take a seat, but take the mic with you and just take it. We'll take one question and then you can answer it from where you are.
Thank you very much for the opportunity, right? And my apologies for running.
We will do that.
Thank you very much, Matthew. Very informative presentation, and I think we're all going to take something away from it. In terms of our kingdom and our communities, we're definitely looking to find ways for people like yourselves to plug in and to add value to what we've been doing communally for centuries, basically. The one issue that I do have, and I think you did highlight it there a little bit, is that getting rid of unproductive animals. And we've seen a lot of that in our communities in the recent past, especially due to good weaner prices. But that's also led to very limited availability of oxen, which we use broadly in our customary and traditional ceremonies. So what's that's resulted in is a lot of people actually not being able to practice those rights, not being able to afford them. So I would think that maybe we need to strike a balance there and find a happy medium in terms of making sure there's an availability of animals in our communities for those customary and traditional rights. Thank you.
I obviously agree with that sentiment. I think you need to kind of model what is the economically and socially optimum structure. If you're looking for oxen, there's a lot in Marlborough that you can kind of get because we're frantically trying to get those off the belt. But I do agree. I think there is This is the perfect example for me. I was working with a farmer in KZN. The guy's got 40 animals, okay? So 500,000 rand. So it's not resource poor, okay? I said to him, you need to build a crush, because otherwise you can't work with the animals. No, I can't afford it. But then I look at his animals, and 20 of them are oxen. So I said, you're going to sell one of those, build the nicest crush available, and now you can farm with the other 39. But don't hold on to those 20 and say, I can't afford it. You're making decisions around how you manage your assets and understand the cost of that. Because the fact that you're not willing to sell one and invest in a crush means that I can almost guarantee that 3 or 4 of those animals are going to die over the next 2 to 3 years.
Good. Thank you very much, Matthew. In a customary way, and also in anticipation that you may want to depart earlier than all of us, we will ask one of the chiefs to do a word of thanks. Chief. No, sir?
For the workshop that you gave us. Have a good day. Thanks.
Thank you very much. My apologies for leaving.
Sure, thank you very much. You are welcome to sit with us.
Yeah,
You are welcome to have tea coffee with us.
I must apologize because I'm going to run to get back to the airport at another meeting. But I am honored to be here. I am hugely encouraged by the vision and leadership being shown here, and I hope that we can contribute in some small way to what you're trying to achieve.
Thank you so much. Let's pray. Let's do hands again. I've taken the liberty to save your presentation on my desktop. Do I get permission? Take permission. Kunajuchaza ukuba sizawuqhuba njani ke just nje ukukhumbuza siphethe iprogram sonke ne just nje ukukhumbuza Tosikweni umnumzana uMatthew engena esikumbandela we-action planning sisethi uwonke because the iyathi yakhupha sibonisene